March 5, I believe we are, or March 4, 2025 to order. And our first item of business, why am I getting a reverb? Just a second. Okay, that better? All right. So our first order of business is review of the agenda and minutes from our meeting last month. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? And are there any additions or corrections to the minutes presented?
I have a couple items to add to today's agenda specifically, and we will go over this in the legislative update, but I just want to give the committee the heads up that we're going to be talking about House Bill 3158, and Assistant City Manager Matt Rodriguez is here with us to walk through that one. We'll add it to revenue taxation, general government, and priority one bills. And then we'll, as we have for Senate Bill 916, a discussion, and Mia Carriaga is here. Mia, you can join if you want, to join us, Central Services Director Mia Carriaga. And then for housing, land use, and development, we have we've got a couple different bills, but then we've got staff here, Assistant City Attorney Lauren Summers, Planning Director Alyssa Hunter, and comprehensive planning staff, Elena Domingo. And then I've got on my notes Senate Bill 229. Is that one? Did we have that one on? Oh, that is Bridge Meadows. Bingo. So I've got that one to add into the mix. So we don't necessarily need to change the agenda. I'm just letting you know that we've got some more items that we're going to have to walk through today. So with that.
Yeah, thanks for that heads up. Appreciate that. And so if we don't have any other additions or corrections to the agenda or additions or corrections to the minutes, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as amended and the minutes as presented.
No moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and it's been seconded. All those in favor, raise your hands or signify by saying aye. I think we're good, 3-0. So let's move on in the agenda with chair elections. So how do we want to do this?
If I may, Councilor Evans, so just as a reminder, and Councilor Groves was not here at the February meeting, that per your operating agreements, they at the beginning of every year, there's an election of the officers, and in this case, the chair for the committee. And we didn't have a meeting in January. February, one of the members was out, so the body requested
we deferred.
Push this to March into this meeting. And so in the past, it's been an open nomination process. You've gone through it a number of times. And so it's up to you as to how you would like to move forward, but we just need to run through the process to identify who the next chair is or continue on.
Okay, well, I mean, without us being too formal, there's only 3 of us on the committee. I'd like to nominate Councilor Groves as chair of IGR for 2025.
He accept? Well, that depends if Councillor Ye is interested in doing it or not.
I'm not going to fight you for it. I think I'm happy to have you do it.
Okay, then, thank you.
All right. We have a nomination, and I'll second it.
Oh, do
Or
I need
did
to
I
do
make the or did I make the nomination?
You did, so I'll second it.
So you seconded, Councilor Ye. Okay. All those in favor of Councilor Groves becoming IGR chair for 2025, if you vote in the affirmative, raise your hand to say yes.
Okay.
All right. That's it.
Enthusiasm.
3-0. Randy, you're the chair. You can take the gavel.
Thank you, Chair. Just a second. I'm still trying to find my my agenda here.
Well, if you want me to continue on with it, we'll do that way, and then I'll hand it over to you.
Could we do that, and then I'll just pick up next meeting? Thank you, sir.
All right, sounds good. So now we're on to our next item, and that is the 2025 legislative update, and I'll turn that over to Ethan.
Thank you, Councilor Evans. And so in the packet that went out earlier this week, there's a update from March 3rd, and this will be, thank you. And this will be the process. We'll just walk through this, and as we walk through each of the items, there will be a position. I'll give some updates, and then the opportunity for questions and input. And hence, we've got a number of staff here to answer any questions that you have that comes on up. And if the body would like to change where the staff's recommended position and priority is, we can do that. And so that's the process. I just wanted to kind of lay it on out so we've got something that we can just walk through methodically, because there's going to be a lot. So just starting out with the top of the memo with Eugene priorities, our unhoused response funding. So House Bill 3644 is the vehicle now. It had been an LC, a legislative concept. It's Governor's Shelter Framework Bill. And in the memo here, there was a public hearing on both the 24th of February and on the 26th. Mayor Knudsen was able to provide virtual testimony on the 26th. We were able to show our shelter video, and we submitted written testimony. And so there's that bill is going to move forward. There's probably some small amendments that might come on up, but it's not too contentious right now, and it has a fiscal of $217.9 million allocated to it, and so if it passes out of the House Housing Committee, it will go to Ways and Means because it's got a fiscal attached to it. It's my assumption if they pull the fiscal from it and it just is a policy only bill, then it will need to go to the floor, and then they'll move it over to the Senate side for a Senate discussion and just have the fiscal be part of the governor's or the legislature's budget bill. Questions on this one or comments? Mayor Knudsen, your experience?
Just say that it was, I appreciated the opportunity in working with staff to develop our testimony for that hearing. And I thought telling that the governor took the time to stop in and attend the hearing and offer perspective of support and how this fits into a larger framework to address our housing and homelessness crisis in Oregon. And then appreciated the opportunity to loop back again on Wednesday, speak directly with the committee. It's an extensive hearing on Monday, and then join after our council work session on Wednesday and submit a written testimony, as well as the video detailing some of the work we've been doing locally, so much of the successful work locally with our shelter providers that was, I think, presented in a very accessible format to everyone who was able to see that video in the hearing and a great resource for our community, for others who are wondering about how it is we're addressing that particular aspect of this challenge.
The moving on, number 2, seek funding for Clear Lake Road infrastructure. I've been working with the staff in legislative fiscal office, and I think that in this memo, and I got an update just yesterday after I'd sent this, early March is probably when capital construction, I think early March may be into mid to late March. And the reason being is that it was scheduled yesterday for Tuesday as capital construction, Tuesday next week. The capital construction committee is going to be meeting, and they're going to be looking at an early session budget reconciliation bill that will take a number of appropriated funds from this current biennium and move them forward into the next biennium. And why that's important for us is that our Clear Lake Road, Crow Road project that was appropriated $6 million under Senate Bill 1537 from last year is going to be moving forward, and we're getting some edits made in terms of the what the funding can be used for. So we will also have transportation and stormwater elements added on, and it will extend the funding. And so we're hoping that that gets passed in by the end of this month. And if so, I think that's with it being in the pipeline, Public Works will be able to move forward with the request for proposals to get construction work done this construction season during the summer. So that's both Clear Lake Road infrastructure and also another capital construction project that we had, or funding that we received last year. Updates. Any questions on that before we move forward? Okay. Number 3, support increased state investment in behavioral health. And so as I had shared before, Lane County is asking within this budget bill, or this budget reconciliation bill, they're asking for some of the funds from last year's, from this current biennium, to move forward that would help fund with capital funds for the Lane County's stabilization center, crisis stabilization center. In addition to that, there's House Bill 2056, which I'd like to be able to add on to our, which I'm recommending that we add on to our priorities, and that is, it's in House Behavioral Health Committee, and it's an amendment that would include $64.8 million to invest in community mental health programs, including mobile crisis and civil commitment process. Our state and federal policy document provides support for taking a support position on that. And I would put it as a priority 1, because that would then, the state would then be allocating, right now they don't have additional dollars to extend funding for mobile crisis response units and some of the other elements of the the funding that supports Lane County community mental health programs that are instrumental in our community. Is there any questions or comments on that position? Seeing none, I'm going to move on. On number 4, so support increased protections related to threats to public officials. So this is embodied within Senate Bill 473. We had a public hearing on the 11th, and we provided testimony. I met with Chair Przanski, Senator McLean, Senator Broadman, and staff from OJD. I was the only non-lawyer in the room. It was really a great experience. And but through that process, there was a long kind of discussion of where the bill is, what's its intended impact, and also what would be some of the unintentional consequences of potentially impacting protected speech. Those were discussed very thoroughly, and all of the members, and so all 3 of those members senators are part of the Senate Judiciary Committee. They all came to the extent back to say the bill as written is great. It does what we are hoping to provide some support for a new law that would establish threat to public officials. And so that should be moving forward. I think the thing now is that Senator Brzezinski asked OJD if they've got any more information before we move the bill for a work session to get that. And so Aaron Knott from OJD is working internally to kind of surface that, and then we're going to move forward on it. Any questions on that one? See,
No. Go ahead, Randy. Oh, wait a minute.
Thank you, Chair.
Randy, oh yeah, I was gonna say, I'm recognizing your hand. I'm sorry. I couldn't
Thank
get
you,
to my
Chair.
mic fast enough.
Well, my question's actually about the last issue, the stabilization center. I couldn't get the hand to go up, so I finally got it there. Do you want me to ask that question when you're done with this issue? What would make more sense for this process to be cogent?
are you asking me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, since you're the one that would be answering.
Let's do it right now.
My question is, what percentage of the budget for the stabilization center would the ask of the state comprise?
Give me a minute. I included the funding breakdown in the presentation that I gave to council on our on the IGR priorities back in early January. And so I'm just pulling that on up right now.
And I apologize. I planned to have all my stuff pulled up, but I spent a week at DMV this morning.
So this comes from what I received from the county, and it may be dated, but it's a $30 million project. They received they have 15.5 million on hand, and that includes 7.5 million in general funds, 3 million from federal sources, and 5 million in state lottery bonds.
Okay.
You're requesting the reauthorization of 7.5 million in state general funds that were appropriated for the project in 2022. And then additionally, the county is requesting that 7.5 million that was allocated as the last money in for the multi-use facility. And so if it's a $30 million project, they're asking for reappropriation of 15 million, and they had an additional 5 million in state lottery bonds, so 20 million. 2/3
Okay.
of their project is going to be coming from the state.
Wow. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, moving forward on to number 5, secure authority for local governments to prohibit firearms in public buildings. No bill has been released yet, so we'll see what happens there. And then 6, improvements to the ground emergency medical transportation system. No bill has been put forward yet. There has been continued conversations with OHA. Deputy Chief Heppel has been involved with those with Oregon Fire Marshals Association. OHA is taking what they can do administratively to address some of the concerns that have been raised by fire districts and ambulance districts. And so that process is moving. And I believe that they're still with Representative Graber has a EMS 2.0 modernization bill that should be moving forward, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But ostensibly in next month, I'll have more updates. Okay, moving on into revenue taxation. I think I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about House Bill 3518. You have documents in front of you of a memo that was put together today, and I emailed that to Councilor Evans and to Councilor Groves just a minute ago. So you should have that memo. And Councilor Evans, I sent it to your city account.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
Okay, great. So Matt, do you want to jump into 3518?
Thank you, Ethan, and I'll do my best. I'm not an expert on taxation and assessment, but we've had some conversations with our county partners to really try and understand the intent of HB 3518. It was introduced in this session on behalf of the Association of Oregon Counties and the Oregon State Association of County Assessors. What the bill would effectively do is raise the county recording fee that goes to the county assessment and taxation fund. More directly impactful to the city is that it would also set aside a set percentage of 0.3% of all property tax money that's collected other than bonds. So from city tax collection, that would include levies and our general tax rate. 0.3% of that would be set aside, and it would go into the statewide county assessment function funding assistance, CAFA. It goes into this pool of funds, and then those funds are redistributed out to all the county tax assessors units to be able to do their work. So it would be an increase in the amount of money that would be collected and then redistributed, including to our partners in Lee County, to go out and actually get on a more regular cycle of inspection and assessment of properties in the city. 0.3% for us is about $420,000 a year, so it's not insignificant. However, another thing that this bill does is it allows the county to withhold the local taxpayer delinquent interest payments that would normally be submitted to the state. And they can withhold those and actually give those back to the jurisdiction they're collecting them within. So for us, last year, that was about $300,000 that would come back to us, which means, and again, this is a 1 year kind of a look at it, but it would really net cost us, let's say between $100,000 and $150,000 per year. What it does for the county is it allows them to add staffing to actually try and get onto a more regular cycle of assessment, which means capturing more value in property taxes to give back to us and other partners in Lane County. A couple of things they shared that I think are kind of interesting. Prior to 1996, kind of implementation of Measure 50 and 47, which was a new one for me, the Lane County Tax Assessment Office was on a 6-year cycle of inspection and reappraisal for properties. At this point, because of the amount of staffing they have no set cycle. They're really triage the highest value building permits that they see come into their system for inspection. They've lost since 2010 about 12 FTE. I think they've got about 48 folks that work there. And according to a State Department of Revenue study, they really should have something on the order of 76. It's actually the biggest gap of any of the major counties in the state and how many folks they should have and how many they do have. There's a substantial amount, and I wish I could have actually shown this in the slide, but they gave us a presentation showing properties. They didn't really have all of Eugene, but probably 2/3 of it you could see in the slides they provided. A substantial amount of property, it appears to be more than half, but we haven't gotten that statistic from them, actually has not been inspected and reappraised since before 2005. And probably, half of those, it was actually before 1997. So there is a lot of property out there to be able to take a look at. If they passed this, if this is passed, what they've said to us is it would allow them to hire an additional 4 to 6 FTE and provide funding for technology. And one of the things they've actually been piloting is the use of AI technology with a company that is able to work with the MLS system and actually go through and try to identify priority properties to go and take a look at. They don't set a value based on that, but it really helps them triage where should we be looking to make sure that people are consistently and fairly paying their tax bill. We have it's something on the order of $19 billion in assessed value within the city of Eugene. If we're trying to make up $100,000 to $150,000, then we're really talking about the county being able to find 0.1, to 0.2% additional value through their work for us to come out even or even then start to be ahead. So they did share some examples of work they're doing that really is trying to work towards that and really being able to make sure that the property tax system as it exists now is giving us the full value coming to municipalities as much as possible. And one of the things for us when we're having that conversation with the county that makes sense is when we're trying to make the argument to the state that we really need to take another look at the property tax system to make sure there's sustainable funding for local governments, showing them that we're using the existing system to the best of our ability is really a good step towards that, and trying to make sure that we get on these more regular assessment cycles can really do that. And most importantly, although it's not in the bill now, we have been assured by our partners that language is going to be added that says that this funding is not to supplant existing funding there. So in other words, we're not now paying $100,000 to $150,000 a year and the county takes away general funds, so they just come out even. So I think I'll leave it there and give room for some questions.
Just to be clear, we're asking for a support position.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Yes, thank you.
So Councilman Rhodes, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is actually exciting to hear this, but I always have to ask the flip side, what are the odds that a percentage or even significant percentage would come in lowering the valuation on a property?
I don't know. I don't have any data that I could give you on that, Councilor Groves. What I would say is if you look at the real market value compared to the assessed value in Lane County, and you can kind of see that in the changed property ratio, I believe that residential properties particularly are somewhere in the range of 0.5, which means that RMV is like double AV. So it probably would be very unlikely that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just don't want to see us lose ground.
Sure. No, it's a great question.
Thank you.
Just observe some information that I learned when listening to a presentation by Lane County Tax Assessor about some of this work and the challenge, which was highlighted in that presentation, the very small number of people whom are present anywhere in the system to be able to help us with this critical step in actually connecting the dots between how our system is serving everyone and serving everyone equally. One of the things that I'm recalling from that presentation was that without a more contemporary or current opportunity to make sure that people are being assessed fairly and not just necessarily cherry picking, that what you have is a wildly inequitable system of assessment, because some people are being assessed at a rate that's in 2022, and some people haven't had their property looked at since 1997. And that circumstance, when we're talking as a community about shared goals and how it is that we are all working towards those goals, it was one of the points that I think also in this public presentation was quite startling to people to not realize, or to realize, I should say, because many people didn't, that our current assessment system, with its lack of capacity, is not delivering that kind of fairness in assessment.
That's a great point. One of the things that they shared is they're only able to go back and collect back taxes for 5 years. So if they do find that there was a mistake in the system, and they actually provided a couple where there were homes that were built and not necessarily in Eugene, there was one in Eugene they highlighted, but homes that were built and then for some reason it didn't change in the tax record for years, maybe 8 years. And when they found it, they were only able to go back and collect 5 years of property tax, which means 3 years is just lost. So it having a regular cycle lets those types of things be caught too. And again, it really is about fairness system.
So it would be, can you give me,
You did a motion and yeah.
yeah, just a motion in terms of accepting the,
I'll move to accept the staff recommendation of support for House Bill 3518.
Second.
There's a second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Passes 3-0.
great.
All right, let's move on, Ethan.
Just move through really quickly on the remainder of these. So House Bill 2333, LOC and AOC continue work with Rep. Nathanson. Our finance staff are providing edits to this amendment that would put together a work group that would be occurring over the 18 months in the interim between the two long sessions to work on 5 and 15. So it's Matt, it's shared, you know, coming back, asking the legislature to take big steps towards property tax reform. We need to be able to show that we're also doing a lot of work. So I plan to have a conversation with Rep. Nathanson tomorrow, just updating on 233, but then also your action today on 3518. And we're asking for a work session on 2333 to happen soon, and we'll have a gut and stuff of that bill. HB 3209, that one, we've got a support position. It hasn't moved yet. It's in joint committee on transportation, may or may not, but basically it would create a surcharge, registration fees on recreational vehicle trip permits and an abandoned RV cleanup. No new update on that. And 2533, this was extends the statutory timeline for inspection of public records when exemptions based on attorney-client privilege. There's been no movement on that bill either. It had a public hearing, but there hasn't been a work session on that one. City of Portland is leading the efforts on moving that one. Moving forward onto the labor, HR, and risk categories, Senate Bill 179. It's the makes permanent the temporary changes related to landlord immunity laws, better known as recreational immunity. We've supported this. It was in Senate Judiciary and it moved out of the committee yesterday of the work session. And so that one's moving forward onto the Senate floor. So it gets us to Senate Bill 916, and Mia's here to help have our conversation. So this bill came on out and it's in Senate Labor, Business and Labor. And the big part of it is it provides unemployment insurance benefits for employees unemployed due to a labor dispute. And so one of the initial pieces that League of Oregon Cities, LLC, and has been seeking clarity on is what constitutes a labor dispute. Because does that mean a labor dispute is somebody on an individual basis or is it on a collective bargaining basis? So that has been addressed in some of the future amendments. We took an opposition stand based upon the projected fiscal impact that would come to the city. Our testimony was submitted that was based upon that and on just a quick calculation of what we could see. We also looked at it as an unfunded state mandate. Since that point, Legislative Policy Research Office gave a testimony at the last work set, or excuse me, I think it was a work session for the Senate committee. And through that testimony, they determined that they do not believe it is an unfunded mandate to local governments, which local governments did not agree with, but that was excuse me, it wasn't LPRO, it was Legislative Council. So that was a little bit more authoritative in regards to their opinion. So the bill continues to get worked in committee, and it came on up that our position, when we looked through our documents, we didn't really have a clear policy direction related to, much like what the one that Matt just went through, we didn't have a clear policy direction on a bill that would have negative financial impacts to the city via labor disputes. And so after talking with leadership, we thought it best to bring it back to this committee to have the discussion as to what position you'd like to take and also what priority. I also kind of turn it back on over. I turn it to Mia for to add anything onto this. As you may recall, many times with this body, that if there's a split decision on the on the IGR committee members, the item will go to full council for discussion based upon the calendar and how this bill is moving. The council has an upcoming break. And so it may be logistically challenging if there's a split vote to move it to council. And I also recall and remind for the group that in the past, sometimes when there's a bill that has a split vote, there's a conversation within the body to take an alternative path, which is to maybe put it as a neutral or no position and allow staff to then move that off of a priority list and it doesn't need to go to council. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mia to add anything that you might want to add.
I don't think I would, well, I'll add a couple of things. One is that our primary concerns were related to the term labor dispute. And as Ethan mentioned, that's been addressed. And then the other is potential financial implications of our 6 bargaining units. 2 are able to strike. AFSCME being our largest, that's over 700 members and could have significant financial impact. Obviously, that's never our aim. We have really good relationships with all of our unions. And for that reason, just want to make really clear that our opposition to this was strictly financial. And I'd leave it at that.
And I believe that the update, I'm sorry. The update is that at this point, the unemployment benefits, they were originally projected to start in week 1. It's been negotiated to start at the end of week 2, and LOC continues to seek further negotiations that the unemployment benefits, if it does move forward, would start at the end of week 3. And so those are just an update in terms of where the bill is heading right now. Thanks.
Yeah. So my question was just to make sure I understand. So this is if there's a strike going on, then I guess people would be unemployed because they're striking. And then this would, okay, you're nodding your head and said then this would kick in. Does it say how long you can be on? Is it just the normal amount of time?
I would imagine that the regular terms for unemployment would apply. Yeah.
And as a reminder, local governments, we don't pay into the unemployment insurance, the pool. We pay out of pocket 1-to-1 for those benefits that are paid on out. And so that's why we have that.
Let me ask this question. How does this relate back to the unemployment benefits that were distributed during the pandemic? Does it have any relationship to that situation with the legislature at that time approving unemployment benefits vis-a-vis the pandemic?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I think most unemployment benefits that were paid out during the pandemic were related to typical layoff situations. So this applies to as the bill says.
Voluntary.
Well, it would be voluntary. Yes, a strike would be considered voluntarily stepping away from your work and regular wage.
Okay. Randy?
Thank you, Chair. I know in the past this has come up and it's never been looked upon favorably, but if the playing field's going to change, is switching our non-protective services contracts, labor contracts to no lockout, no strike status with arbitration. Is that something that we would consider just to kind of, level the playing field and also be able to manage our costs?
We could certainly consider that. I don't think that looking at the history of establishing and updating our collective bargaining agreements or our relations with any of our units would imply that we necessarily have an immediate concern around this. It's more about wanting to mitigate a future and potential liability. I think we also run the risk of employees being potentially more willing to walk away from work if they know they can be compensated, even if they're not doing, on the job.
Yes, I think definitely that there's the potential for that to happen. But, again, just looking, maybe the variables that have been considered in the past when the city, we have rejected adding no strike, no lockout provisions in the labor contracts. It didn't rise to the level of concern, but this could change the whole dynamic. And it does provide a pathway forward for resolving labor conflicts in a reasonable, fair, and equitable way. And so if the cost is going to start escalating without having any control over how long a strike might take place, this might be a viable alternative. And I realize that doesn't fix the entire labor market, which this is trying to address, but at least it would certainly provide more certainty for bargaining unit members, and it would provide more predictability for budget expenditures for our city. And then I have a second question. If we're looking at this and trying to figure out how do we minimize future liability, and I always like to add, trying to find ways to resolve our labor disputes, but would paying into the pool all of a sudden make sense, which it hasn't made sense in the past?
It very well could. We periodically review that. And so I think this would, should this go forward, we will definitely do that.
I think looking at both of those, both of those pathways forward, considering what's before the legislature now, I think it would be prudent, because our financial situation is obviously not getting any better.
We can certainly do that.
Thank you.
We have a gauge of how popular this is right now. Sometimes you kind of have a feeling of whether something has a chance of passing or not.
It's a really good question. It has been a very divisive issue in Salem right now. And especially a lot of input from healthcare workers and during a period of time when Providence was out on their labor disputes and strikes. And it's lined on up labor. And so when you look through testimony, just kind of looking at testimony, there's a support as many labor and employees represented by labor. And then the opposition is business and then management. And I would say that cities and public agencies that have been in opposition. And so Lane County took an opposition position. AOC took a neutral position. LSC has been in opposition to it because of the management perspective and the cost of that. So I think that those are the elements regarding like how it's going to play them out. I think that there's a lot of vote counting happening right now. And I don't think, and with it being stuck in committee and it hasn't gotten over session yet, they're still working through what are all the elements of it. I don't know if the full Senate Democratic caucus is supportive. I'm imagining the Republican caucus is aligned to oppose. And then once it gets to the House, and as you may recall, that both chambers have a supermajority of Democratic. So.
I guess my thought was that if we thought this was going to pass, that maybe neutral would be a smarter move to make. it sounds like it would be very expensive, and I'm not sure we can afford really expensive right now. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a tough one. My father went through several strikes and they were rough for us. I know, so I get it, but also I'm not sure if this creates the even playing field that Randy. I'm not an expert in this area. I don't know.
Randy, you have your hand up again?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree, Jennifer. I don't know if it does or doesn't. I mean, but you're right. This is one of those situations, though. Are there things that we can then do to counter, at least for the city? That, we're not going to be able to fix the whole state, obviously, and I know our business community is concerned about this, but just trying to look at how do we best manage our liabilities for the future, should this pass. And I mean, it'd be really interesting to see kind of a cost comparison over arbitration versus strikes that have happened here in our city in the past. I mean, I'm certainly
Oh,
not
yeah.
expecting an exhaustive research on this, but I think
Hello.
it behoove us to um,
I'm on a meeting call.
Oh, okay. Couldn't tell where that was coming from. It would behoove us to at least have a level of understanding of what the differences might be.
Well, sure. We could take a look at arbitration costs, even if we were to just look at support from outside legal counsel, that would be a number that we could pull more quickly. That, of course, is never going to include the organizational resources that we dedicate to those efforts, which are not insignificant.
Right. They aren't
Um,
insignificant, but neither is compensation while on strike.
True.
Just trying to get a sense where the cost differential between the two approaches might be. And I guess another question, and this is more of a legal question that maybe we don't have answers to, if we were to build in a no strike, no lockout clause with binding arbitration for our other bargaining units beyond public safety or protective services, um, would that well, they wouldn't be striking. So I guess the other wouldn't kick in. I just answered my own question. Never mind. Thank you.
So I want to come back and have the conversation before any motions put on the table in terms of how are members feeling regarding the existing position of oppose. We've had it as a priority one. Do you, and I guess maybe kind of get a thumbs up, a thumbs down, a neutral thumb to let us know where you're thinking, how that fits with you, and if we need to move in a different direction.
Well, I think we maintain the status quo. Um, this is a real slippery slope to fall off into, and there's a lot of complicated issues that go with compensations uh, for employees who are striking. So I would say no.
It sounds like we're still waiting to get more information on this bill, right? That they're still working on amendments. Can we oppose it pending work that is done? Is that an option? I feel like our position and the way we work with our unions may be very different than how other people.
Yeah.
I would feel comfortable being like, I'm not sure this is something that is really needed, but then I actually don't, I'm not familiar with what other people are dealing with and what this is, if this is something that's really necessary or not.
Counselor
We,
Ye, are you suggesting that we take a neutral position
I think
pending
I'd be more comfortable with neutral.
pending other information?
Yeah. Does that work? What do you think,
Uh,
Randy?
Counselor?
I'm where Councilor Ye is. I think a neutral position at this point, because I don't think we have enough information yet. I understand we need to be very prudent and respectful of our financial situation. I also know that a lot's falling on labor's plate these days, and I'm also concerned about our employees and the long-term relationship. I mean, it's I always thought in the fire department that we should have done a in-depth study on the cost of poor morale. When morale is low, injuries go up, sick leave goes up, productivity goes down, and it ends up costing substantially more. So sometimes what seems like an expensive solution up front, um, I think there are times where it actually um, makes sense to spend a little more money up front to avoid the back end. But I don't feel like I've got enough information at this point to, firmly land on one side or another. I do understand where our chair is, Councillor Evans, and I get that. I just, if we can hold off a little bit in hopes of getting some more information, it might help me land on a more firm position on this one.
Okay, so I'm seeing which way the wind is blowing here. So why don't we, can we take a neutral position on this? I think we could get 3 votes around that. I'm willing to bend. Uh, is that okay with you, Jennifer and Randy? All right. So we'll take a vote on this. We are voting to take a neutral position on this bill, pending um, further information. So does that work for you, Ethan?
I serve at the pleasure of the committee.
All right, then. Sounds good to me.
Good place
All
to
those
land.
in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, it carries 3-0. We will take a neutral position on this bill.
Thank you. Mia, if you both Matt and Mia, if you want to hang out for the rest of it, you can, but we got moving into housing development, land use, shelter. I just want to be mindful of time. We've got some other big items. I'm going to just jump through some of the easier ones, the less complicated ones, and then be able to leave time for a discussion on some of the more complicated ones. So House Bill 3031. It's the Governor's Housing Production Bill. There's currently a -1 amendment we've reviewed. We've been engaging and leading cities, League of Oregon Cities. I've been at the table with the governor's staff, and we're working on crafting a -2 amendment. We're really wanting to see a lot of what has been put into statute be moved on into rulemaking, because it'll give a lot more flexibility for the program. And basically, it would be setting up a new program within Oregon Business Development Department, OBDD or Business Oregon, to establish loans, forgivable loans and grants to on infrastructure projects related to housing. And currently, there's income qualifications, and those are fine. And I think the city supports those as written. We'd like to see them put into stat or to rule to make them a little bit more flexible as conditions change. But that's for parcel or project by project. And so maybe a 300 unit affordable housing project was going to be seeking infrastructure funds. For projects like Crow Road, having an affordability covenant and restriction or requirement would make it really, really difficult for the city to be competitive into getting what we really want was be a forgivable loan or a grant, not a loan. And so that's one example of what we're working on with the governor's office to really try to move this. I think that we're going to get some traction on that. Likely the bill will come back on up for another public hearing. Chair Marsh said that there will be another public hearing on the amendments rather than just moving on into a work session. So we're in support. We're working on amendments, and I think that we'll end up with something really good. Questions on that one? House Bill 2960.
I've got a question on this. So what is the difference between a grant and a forgivable loan? If we've got if we're doing a loan on a housing project and we're saying that, hey, the developer's running into challenges, whatever the case may be, they may not be able to service the loan. So are we going to just or the state's going to just write the loan off instead of just saying, okay, let's just make this money a grant straight out and forget about trying to recoup the investment vis-a-vis a loan.
Councilor Evans, quick answer on that one is that a grant would be something that would be given upfront.
Right.
So,
and no strings attached in terms of.
Well, you'd still need to deliver on what you
Yeah.
proposed.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
forgivable loan would be contracted as a loan with qualifying outcomes. Once you met those outcomes, then the loan would be forgiven by the agency. So that's how we would be structuring those.
But we haven't developed that criteria yet, correct?
Exactly, and that's why we are asking those criteria to be put into rulemaking rather than trying to do that into statute, because then it's going to be more challenging to do that right now, and also to change if it's not written correctly.
Okay, well, I want to ask Mayor Knudsen, what do you think about this, since you've been more involved in this process than some of the rest of us have been? Do we go with the loan / grant approach versus what I'm thinking is, why even mess with a loan? Just go with a straight grant.
Thank you, Councilor. I would say, big picture, the position of support for this bill, I think aligns with a lot of the conversations that are happening at council and work that staff is currently doing. I don't know which projects and which strategies for funding those projects would make a grant or a loan a more likely to be helpful or useful type of funding. So I don't have an opinion to share about which one of those is more useful, and it sounds like we might learn more. I do think what staff is describing in terms of the work happening in rulemaking rather than in statute makes a lot more sense when thinking about the nuance and the new work that is being initiated by these housing production bills and the state's shift to really support housing production. There's a lot of complexity there, and it's hard to imagine all of it fitting inside of the statute.
So let me be clear about this. So staff's recommendation is that we support both the grant and loan approach pending rulemaking coming out from the legislature.
Yeah, I'll be even more clear, Councilor Evans. I think the state would prefer to have more loans. They already have a special public works fund within Business Oregon that is loans only. We don't access that. If this program is just loans only, we probably won't access it. Forgivable loans and grants we will access. So as an example, our Crow Road project was a direct grant of $6 million. We are now putting that, we've got matching funds and we're acting on that ASAP. If the state puts together just a program that's loans, it's not going to be functional for a lot of cities. And so that's one of the reasons why myself and others are strongly advocating for forgivable loans and grants to be a component part of the program, so that it's actually funds that we can access and use.
Okay. Do you need us to make a motion and take a vote on this?
Nope, this is I'm just sharing with you where we are. This one is in our existing policy documents. We're good to go.
Okay, keep going, Ethan.
Okay. 2967, and so this is the residential landlords from charging an applicant screening charge. As you may recall, you had a work session in late January where you gave me direction to go advocate for this. We did so. The bill has had a public hearing. It's now getting a work session, and in the interim,
Thank you, Ethan. Lauren Summers, Assistant City Attorney. As you all know, the Supreme Court, last week, denied review, so decided not to take up the appeal of Eugene's cap on applicant screening charges, which means that the Oregon Court of Appeals decision, which said that City of Eugene had the authority to impose a cap on applicant screening charges and it was not preempted by a state statute from doing so, stands. So Eugene's code provisions are effective and my understanding is that staff has started to put out communications to landlords in the city to let them know that the applicant screening charge is effective and will be enforced. So that's where the legal landscape stands now. If this bill passes, it would prohibit all applicant screening charges. So the city's $10 cap would be kind of overwritten by the state legislation and landlords would not be able to charge any sort of applicant screening charge.
Thank you, Lauren. In Eugene's experience is being discussed related to this bill quite extensively. So we'll see if it gets a work session and if it stays the way it's written. We're continuing to support. Just moving on, House Bill 2347. It's the DLCD technical fix bill on middle housing code. We stayed neutral on that. I put in a linked an overview. It's voted out of the House unanimously, and then it passed out of the House chamber with a 49-7-4 vote. So it had Republicans weighing in. So I think it's a pretty straightforward technical fix bill. It's going to move through the Senate. Senate Bill 49. So this one is relating to housing. It's a broad bill, and but it has a lot of preemptive land use authority elements. We're in opposition. I'm working on testimony right now. It actually had a public hearing starting at 1 o'clock today. Many cities were in opposition. We were asked to testify. We couldn't because we're here. But Elena, do you have input onto what the bill does and why we oppose it?
Sure. So I think it was posed as sort of a housing production bill. But I don't think anything in that bill would actually result in more housing development in Eugene. I don't know how in the weeds you want to go, but one of the things it's proposing to do is remove mandatory minimum densities, which seems very much counter to Eugene's goals to increase production and density and move towards our housing need. It's also counter to some of the climate friendly area standards that will require minimum densities moving forward. Minimum densities aren't really a barrier in Eugene, and if they were, the city could choose to remove them without it being mandated by the state. It sets up a sort of a process for creating inclusionary zoning programs, the dash ones weren't posted until Monday, so I have not talked with all the people I would want to talk to really be more informed about it. But I think reading other cities' testimony and from how I read it, that basically, if we wanted to pursue inclusionary zoning, there would be required analyses and prescribed subsidies, which would essentially make it administratively burdensome if we ever did want to pursue an inclusionary zoning program. But the way it's written would just kind of be too expensive and burdensome for us to actually move forward. But I would want to talk to our community development folks more about their thoughts on that. It isn't written super well about in this section about model zoning codes, but basically says, I don't know what it says exactly. It says at least one area, which I think they mean one zone, but that's super unclear, that would allow for each housing type under the model ordinances. It seems like the bill sort of assumes that the model code is more permissive than local codes, which I don't think would be the case for Eugene. And so if we did need to it could result, I think, in some like busy work in updating our code, even though we are already kind of have that flexibility in our zones around housing types. Yeah, it's just, I don't know that I don't think there's anything in here that would actually result in more housing. And it's a little bit unclear and preemptive, so we're opposed at this point.
Okay.
Questions, comments? Thank you, Elena.
I could just add from a timing perspective around the zoning to allow various housing types. The reference is to not the middle housing model code, but DLCD was directed in the last session to develop model codes for various different housing types that would be applicable or could be adopted by cities of different sizes. Their deadline for adopting those model codes is January of 2026, and this bill goes into effect in January of 2026. So there would be no time for cities to see what DLCD has adopted and implement that into their code as the bill is currently written.
I think one of the key points that is within our policy document that Alyssa crafted, Lauren and Alyssa crafted a few years back, was the second policy item, which says, if an item, first one is no preemption. Second one is, okay, if you're going to move forward and you're going to preempt local control, ensure that the statutory language is clear and is implementable. And I think that that's where we run into a lot of challenges, is that state land use code is a very complex matter. It's hard to write, and it's a lot of interpretations across the state in regards to how to implement it. And so what we find ourselves and why we take the position that we do at times is that while we may read the writing on the wall that the preemption is going to happen, we want to make sure that it is written in a way that we can implement it. And so I think that that's some of the work that we continue to do on bills, is to say, okay, if it's going to move forward, we oppose the preemption, but if it's going to move forward, please ensure that it's written in a manner that we can implement at the local level and not be litigated on because of the ambiguity and lack of clarity within the statute. Is that accurate? And so that's hence some of the reasons why we take, when Elena says it's not clearly written, why we say, okay, well, not clearly written. Anything else on Senate Bill 49? Okay, moving forward, House Bill 2138. So this is the governor's middle housing bill, taking a neutral position, but we will likely move to oppose unless it's amended to address the issues that we've identified. Back to my previous point of either there's a preemption or it's poorly written. It had its first public hearing on Monday in House Housing, and the Chair Marsh said that there would be a second public hearing and in the first public hearing, the governor's staff referenced that they would be working on a -2 amendment to come forward. And so Alyssa's been reaching out to governor's staff, Matt Scheibald, and we will continue to stay engaged on that. Many cities took a neutral position. Eugene's not alone in that, and our neutral position. Some cities took oppose, very few took support. And the neutral position was based upon many cities saying, if we can get the issues addressed before the -2 comes on or with the -2. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is billed by the state as increasing housing production with middle housing and infill. And it addresses middle housing standards, middle housing land divisions and expedited land divisions, single room occupancy buildings, and then clear and objective housing standards in general. I would say it's really a mixed bag for us. It would codify a number of things that we already allow through either our clear and objective standards or through our middle housing standards. For instance, it would require that we allow detached middle housing. So you could have 2 units on one lot and that would be considered a duplex and they wouldn't have to be attached. Our code already allows for that. It would prohibit requiring a TIA for housing. We don't require one for housing. It says no parking or limits parking for SROs. We don't require parking for SROs. And there's a handful of things that we already allow that this would put into state law. And then it does allow for a few things that we would support, but honestly, they don't make a huge impact when it comes to housing production. And so it allows for detached SROs. We know there's a little interest for those, but I don't know that it's very expansive. There's a density bonus for income qualified housing and accessible housing. So those are good things. We already have some density bonuses in our middle housing ordinance. And it also allows us to consolidate land divisions for middle housing if there's another house on the lot, which isn't going to probably increase housing, but it would remove a barrier in terms of they don't have to go through two separate land divisions. It would be one land division. And then kind of as Ethan alluded to, and similar to what Elena mentioned about Senate Bill 49, we do have a lot of concerns about the language in a number of the sections and some unintended consequences. Land use law is really complicated, and if you start tinkering over here, sometimes you mess up things over here and here and here. And so there's some of that we're still trying to uncover and discover. Some of the language that we have concerns about includes a requirement for clear and objective standards for urban services, which is a lot broader than things that we look at in the land use code. There's also a provision about prohibiting exactions when there's traffic related exactions. So how much public improvement you can require in the street or the right of way for middle housing. And it's really unclear when and how that applies and what size of a project it could apply to. There's some tweaks happening to the noticing requirements for the middle housing land divisions that have some really massive unintended consequences. And then some changes to the definition of cottage cluster that kind of make it maybe meaningless, that you could just have a fourplex and it would be the same thing. So there's a lot in play here. I'm hopeful that the -2 amendments can clean up some of this, and we'll look forward to working with the governor's office and LOC on those. And hopefully see more.
The last thing that I would add is that, and this was consistent feedback and testimony from cities and local governments, is that as you just heard from Alyssa, a lot of complexity and then implementing, and this isn't on our planning division's work schedule. And so other things get moved off, and the majority of planning departments, divisions across the state in cities are general funded, and many general funded operations are facing budget challenges. And so really getting the recognition that over the past 5-6 years, the state has moved forward with a lot of land use mandates that have taken a lot of staff time, and it's cost cities a good amount of money. And we're in a period when we're struggling financially, as you all know. And so adding more of these mandates does not allow us to work on the things that have been locally generated and locally identified, and also doesn't take into consideration the fiscal issues that we're struggling with. So those are another part of the conversation that we continue to advocate for the state to understand. But with that, if there's questions or discussion on 2138.
I'm just gonna start talking, 'cause I don't know.
Go ahead.
So I get what you're saying, and I know we've had a lot of things we've had to deal with because of the state, and they come unfunded often, and it's a huge burden, and I totally get that. But thinking back to so many years ago with House Bill 2001, I feel like perhaps that process would have gone better if we had been, hey, we're supportive in general. Can we work on these things together to make it better, rather than being like, we hate this, you need to fix it, which didn't go so well for us. And I'm just wondering how you all feel about that. Because this seems very similar to that. It's like, we're not against these. There are many good things in here, or things that we're like, well, we're already doing that. That's fine. They work for us, I assume, you know. So how do you feel about that?
Well, that was actually we were having a conversation around this bill, we being the city lobby. That was my perspective that I shared. I said, we haven't been that successful in coming in and saying, we oppose these things. And we've done that. I mean, there's been times when we wrote testimony for Mayor Venice, and Mayor Venice had to draw the line in the sand, and it didn't go well with relationships, and the bill still passed. So I think that we take that into account, and we say that's why we're neutral, but we would move to oppose unless amended, and we are working on the amendments, right? And so I think that we're saying the same thing. If you want to say, if the IGR committee would rather have us say neutral, moving to support
Right.
with amendments, then we can do that, because it's roughly what we're saying. It's like, we need to see some of these things change so that we can get into a supportive role mode. But currently we're just in a neutral place because there's some stuff that's just, it would be really difficult for us to implement. So, which is different than our position from 2001, which was just opposed.
Right, which that was not fun. Yeah.
I think we remain neutral, but just my opinion on this.
Lauren has her hand up.
Go ahead.
I'll just offer a couple additional thoughts, because connecting this also back to the council's urban growth strategies work session and some forecasting for those of you I know also participated in some of those community workshops, that in many ways we are ahead of a lot of places in the state, a lot of cities in the state with our housing work. And what staff just described in terms of several things being established in this particular bill that, you know, as part of a much larger raft, we've already accomplished. And also, I do think that given the trajectory of that housing production work that we've also heard about at council, that it is really important for our staff to be, and not just our IGR manager, but continued engagement of our technical expertise in housing and in our code to be engaged in this work, because I think there is a really optimistic view of the future in which Eugene is part of crafting more of this type of work in a way that then allows our city to be clearly in support of the work, because we've actually done the work to develop the technical expertise underlying it. And I know we're deeply engaged in so many of these conversations, so it's not as though that has not been happening. But it does feel very much like one of those bills where certainly if there was a movement for the city towards opposition, it might be quite confusing to people who we are also simultaneously talking with about how much we care about housing production and shelter capacity and meeting the crisis of housing and homelessness in our community, because they are all conceptually and in reality and in statute and funding interrelated. So I appreciate the way that the IGR committee is discussing this and that move towards and that neutral position. I can imagine a future in which we are supportive of this kind of work. I think there are lots of reasons and ways we could craft our testimony to make a clear statement about where our community is going and all of the good work that is here. But I would also encourage the committee to stay abreast of this conversation if it were to shift for some reason through the amendment process towards opposition, because I think you would want to have that discussion again relative to a lot of other goals. That's just my 2 cents.
I mean, the reason why I like the idea, if we're gonna keep the neutral, which it sounds like there's a majority, that our default is to not oppose it automatically. Like, I like that we're working towards, I realize no one's gonna see this document, but I feel like it creates a mindset that we're trying to get to support rather than we're looking for ways to not like it. And maybe that is semantics, and it sounds like you're kind of already doing the thing that I would like us to be doing, which is, we all want the same things here. Let's get this to a place where it works for us.
Definitely.
Keep all options on the table open.
And I guess what I'm hearing is that if I amended this to say neutral, and move to support with amendments.
Yeah, I think we can go with that. Randy?
Yes, I agree with that. Again, this is another one of those things where we need to kind of be supportive, but also watch how it develops and um, hopefully be more nimble where we don't take a long time to come up with a position once we fully understand where things are going. But which may even mean more meetings to make sure we're plugged in, but they could be shorter. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and we don't need to take a vote on that or any, I just made that amendment. And I very much appreciate the discussion to then address this as you may not have known, the memo and the discussion that Matt and I had and that Matt provided today all occurred from 10 o'clock this morning until 1 o'clock, 1:30. So we are working in a compressed time scale, but we do what we can in that time. Any other comments before we keep moving forward? Because there are a couple other items.
Let's keep moving forward, Ethan. We're about 6 minutes left in our scheduled time.
Yep. So there's two items. We took a position on House Bill 3062, and I just want to give you an update on that. And Elena wrote most of the testimony. It was a strange one because it was based upon a public health standard and advancing that. We took an opposition standpoint because it would mandate it, and so once again it would be a state preemption and a mandate, and also it was poorly written. And what we presented was we were in opposition to the way it was written, the concept we liked, and here's some examples of how Eugene has done that work. And so I didn't put it onto the list. I will add it to our list for to monitor. We don't believe it's going to move right now because it's a planning land use document or item, and they put it into emergency management, general government, and veterans committee because the chair is really the one moving on this rather than putting in a committee where we believed it should have been. So that's just an FYI. You know that we don't have a lot of time unless there's an item there. On Senate Bill 229, this one Senator Manning brought on up, and Councilor Keating in his role as Senator Manning's chief of staff brought it to my attention, and I spoke with the opponents of it. It's in your packet, and I sent it out to the group. My position is it aligns with the city's policy documents related to supporting different types of innovative housing. This the Bridge Meadows is a program that would they're asking for $1 million to do projects in Clackamas and Lane County. One would be here potentially in Eugene, and they would be doing multi-generational housing and the inclusion of foster youth. And so it's very it's got all of the pro-social goals of the city of Eugene and our community in it. And if we were able to, if the legislature allocates money, then it would actually come to Eugene. But I just want to give you a heads up that we will take a position of support. It won't be a priority one. I'll write a letter of support, get it to them. But I just wanted to give you that heads up. And also because one of your colleagues is interested in moving that. The last bill on our list is House Bill 3243. This one is a balanced billing, but also the big part for us on ambulance ground transportation services is that we testified, Deputy Chief Heppel testified in support of maintaining the ability for local governments to set the local rates. And so this one should move forward. We had a lot of support. It's in House Behavioral Health Care, and the chair, Representative Notes, is very supportive of the moving it forward in the way that ambulance services companies and specifically public service wants one moving forward. So that's just a heads up. That's finalizing the stock. Councilor Evans, if I may, I'm just going to move on into just Federal United Front update.
So, yeah, go for it.
So it's our United Front trip is going to be for the week of April 7th. That's Sunday through the Thursday. Mayor Knudsen, Matt Rodriguez, and I, and so Matt and I have done some initial discussion on strategy. I've been working with the Smith Garson team. SDA changed their name to Smith Garson. Brett Garson is now one of the principals of the group. And so and we've been pulling together all of the United Front documents, starting to figure out what our meetings are. And then Matt and I are going to be meeting with you, Mayor Knudsen, in about 2 weeks' time to walk through more of that. And then there will be other elements of that. Two of the aspects that we may be looking to discuss, depending upon how the federal climate works on out, is we put forward our congressionally directed spending for the next fiscal year. So the one that would start, the federal fiscal year that would start in October 1st of 2026. And the two requests that we put forward on the Senate side are EPD equipment. And so that would, and for $3 million, and that would be a replacement of tasers, body worn and dash cameras. And then we also put forward a request for $3 million for airport improvements, Eugene Airport improvements. And that's just a drop in the bucket related to all the capital improvements and projects that are happening, but it would be one way to start to get more federal funding to be allocated towards discretionary federal funding to be allocated towards these programs. So those were submitted to the Senate, Senate Merkley and Senator Wyden's portals, and we will take those two projects and put them also forward for on Congresswoman Hoyle's once those open. We did have a project that was related to urban forestry and the wildland interface fire reduction efforts, and Parks and Open Space is going to likely move forward with that, if not this year, next year, but they weren't ready to move forward with it under this Senate portal timeline. And internally, the last part is that internally we have started an effort to coordinate and pull together and aggregate all of the potential impacts to the federal funding freeze that the city of Eugene would experience through the different grants that we hold. And so we're pulling that information together and being able to have that as something to add to our, or having prepared to share if the opportunity presents itself in a beneficial way in the United Front trip, and also with our state delegation. I'd say that just the last thing related to the federal funding freeze, it has a lot of the state budget writers and the state leadership and the legislature very concerned about if the federal budget or if the federal government withholds money from the state of Oregon, it could be up to a $2 billion impact, which would set all of the revenue, the positive revenue forecasts that have come on out in disarray, and would be a lot of the initiatives that we are seeing with potential funding increases like our shelter program and stuff potentially be negatively impacted. So that's the tenor of the environment in Salem right now, a lot of different bills, and also just a real big concern on budget. And with that, that's it for me.
Ethan, two quick questions here. One, the $3 million going to the airport, is that for improvements in the baggage system? What specifically is that money for? And is that request coming through FAA for that grant?
Councilor Evans, yes, the account that we would be, and so we submitted for it, it would be a congressionally directed spending, which would be an earmark. And so you have to identify which account it would come out of. And it was the FAA's airport improvement program. And the project, we kept it pretty flexible. So working with Rich and with Catherine, we wanted to make sure that we have a flexible ask that can get kind of get focused in if it gets support and continues to move through the multiple hurdle process, because it could go to the baggage claim project, or it could go to is it Concourse A, Concourse C?
Concourse C development.
There's two. So we have a Concourse A expansion, and then C is the larger.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're trying to keep it flexible depending upon how what's happening at the federal level, and then if we get some support. So, but you know, that's where we are.
So the other question that I think I hate to ask is, and I know you don't know the answer to this, but what is the likelihood that we get $2 billion stopped from the federal level right now. I know that the administration can bankrupt any agency they want to at any time. But aren't there certain congressional processes and hurdles they have to go through for certain monies that cannot just be arbitrarily cut off?
Counselor Evans, in regards to that, that's a longer answer and we are past time. Do you
Yeah,
want
I
to
got
extend?
you. We could do that one offline, Ethan.
And I would say that I can send, I'm working on a memo that gives an update on federal action or state actions in response to the federal administration's actions, including lawsuits. And so I'm working on that. I want to get it to leadership to take a look at and then potentially send out to all council.
Because I don't need to restate, we're on the West Coast and we are a target to be, you know, denied funding. So we don't have anything else for the good of the order. Does any one of the members of the committee have anything else?
No.
Well, if not, Ethan, anything last minute or anybody else at the table?
No, Chair.
All right, then we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
All right.